So as we jump into the third video, I'm going to start taking some of the questions I got over at the Prestige Gamers forum. And smartly, the YouTube auditor didn't send me any questions there either. First question from FunFX 2011. Have you seen Shrek is Love, Shrek is Life? And second, what game have you played that scared you the most or had the most nightmare fuel? Nope, I've never seen it. I'm not even going to Google it. For scariest game, you know, I never played a game that gave me nightmares, but if I had to pick the scariest game that I played, it would probably be Silent Hill. You know, the mist made that game creepy on top of the imagery around the maps when they shifted to that other world or whatever the fuck, so that's the only thing that I could possibly think of. Next two questions from Big Matt 319. Thoughts on Straight Up Knives, and how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? I think he just wanted me to say that shit. As for Straight Up Knives, I'm appreciative for all the times that he asked me to do a commentary on his top 5 segments. Now, as for your little riddle, a woodchuck would chuck all the wood he could chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood. I bet you wasn't expecting that as an answer. KSam96 Trini wants to know which PS4 exclusives are you looking forward to, and what exclusives do you expect in the future? Although I mentioned this in a prior question, Uncharted 4 tops the list, as does Little Big Planet. After that, there's really not much. Drive Club only looks okay, but if the crew delivers as promised, I'd rather get that. The Order 1886 looks odd, and I'll wait till the reviews on that motherfucker. But other than that, Sony has been slacking on the exclusive games from their studios. Now, down the road, I'm expecting some exclusive games. Obviously, the Santa Monica studio is going to release something that's not God of War. Guerrilla has an RPG game in the works, supposedly, and eventually we're supposed to get The Last Guardian. Who the fuck knows? Gran Turismo 7 is going to be on the horizon, and I'm sure they have a number of other projects that they just haven't released info on yet. Next two questions from Poindexter. What do you work as, and what is the annual income? My job is to tell other people to do their jobs better, and the annual income is a 6-figure salary. Next two questions from Smelly Undies. Have you ever had any technical issues on your side whenever you're doing a hipfire commentary? And out of all the DC and Marvel characters, which is your favorite? Now, number two I already answered. Obviously, I have no favorite. However, in the earliest hipfire commentaries, I had the phone interruption like you mentioned. In the middle of a video, the Audacity that I was using crapped out on me, so I had to do the whole commentary all over again from the beginning. But those are the only two instances I can think of. I mean, in 3+ years I've been doing these, I've learned how to make sure shit like that doesn't happen to me during my videos. Next question from Ricco. Have you ever run into someone who was just watching one of your videos? If so, did you try talking to them by changing your voice? No, I have never run into anybody watching my videos. I have never met anybody who's come across my videos, so I've never had to worry about that experience. And the final question from Prestige Gamers, and this comes from FlyinReaper. He got this one in just before I had a cutoff where I said I was taking no more questions. So he's the final person that actually got in this question. He asked two things. Will This Is an Asshole series in Mass Effect 3 ever make a return? And do you think that the new Mass Effect game, Mass Effect 4, will be an unnecessary addition to the series? Now, as for the This Is an Asshole, it's certainly not going to return for Mass Effect 3. Now, I'm not going to be posting up any more Mass Effect 3 videos other than the Goodbye PlayStation series. So if it does return, it will probably be in some other episode, whether it's going to be Destiny, whether it be Mass Effect 4. If it does return, I'm not sure if it's going to return. The video has to meet certain requirements of someone being an asshole for me to make it into a video. So for now, I don't know if it's going to return or not. And as for Mass Effect 4, I mean, we knew based on popularity that BioWare wasn't going to end the series after number 3. We knew after all the millions of games it sold, there was no way they were just going to stop the Mass Effect universe. Now, as it being an unnecessary addition, we have to wait and see. Now, they said it's not a direct sequel, so obviously Commander Shepard's story is over. We don't know if it's going to be a prequel. We don't know if it's going to be far down the future after the Reapers have invaded. We have to wait and see until at least they come up with something. I have a feeling it's going to be a prequel. My guess is they're going to do between the Human and Turian War, you know, explaining how that shit all happened. But again, I'll just have to wait and see what the story actually tells as to whether or not it's going to be an unnecessary addition. AeRa Monkey wants to know, and I assume that's how you pronounce that shit. I don't know, looks like a clan tag, whatever the fuck. I really don't give a shit. Anyway, he wants to know, what are your views towards feminist groups and activists? Do you think that they are a helpful cause and make a difference in our society, or that they aren't effective at all and they make everything worse than it already is? And that is just one long run-on sentence, motherfucker. Now, let's make a few distinctions first before we begin. You mentioned feminist and activist groups in the same sentence. Feminist groups are obviously activist groups, but there are hundreds of thousands of activist groups. Some are more notable than others, and they all fight for different causes. Like, for example, PETA is an activist group. Greenpeace is an activist group. The NAACP is a sort of semi-activist group in this motherfucker. You have MAD, Mayors Against Illegal Guns, so on and so forth. So, that's an extremely broad term that covers tons of topics. You know, even feminist groups, they fight for different causes. You have groups that look to make sure women are treated equally in the workplace. You have groups that fight against retaliation for women getting pregnant or moms losing their jobs because of childcare issues. Then you have women's rights groups that picket and protest things like strip clubs or porn stores, saying it's demeaning to women. You know, groups that protest against movies because it shows a naked woman, whatever the fuck, man. So just saying a feminist group is a very broad term. Now, I'm going to assume you mean the latter, where they'll protest anything in which they feel women are being used as objects and immediately argue against virtually anything. You know, like protesting outside of a Hooters or protesting outside of the Playboy Mansion or some shit like that. You know, in this country, you have a right to the freedom of speech and the right to assembly. I don't necessarily have to agree with them, but taking away their rights to be a pain in the ass is a bigger concern of mine. You know, it's one thing for a feminist group to argue for equal treatment. It's one thing to argue against being discriminated against just because you're a woman. It's one thing to fight for women's rights when women are being abused or harmed, or they're fighting against sex trafficking and whatnot. But when they want to argue that men objectify women, guess what? Women do it to their own selves as well. You have cunts like Kim Kardashian and any one of these Instagram sluts who post pictures of their ass with a duck face asking for attention and shit like that. They objectify themselves as well. They choose to sexualize themselves for profit or personal gain, but they never protest the free will of women. They only protest it when men objectify them. It's a double standard. Women have it as hard as it is. Don't get me wrong. It's much easier being a man than it is a woman, and there are plenty of double standards between the sexes. When feminist groups bitch and whine over objectifying women, but only when a man's doing it, it's hypocritical. Then when they don't do it when a woman chooses to objectify herself, that shows they're not arguing for the full cause. And that's my biggest beef with them. They have every right to protest. They have every right to make an ass out of themselves. But each time they do it, it shows how hypocritical they can be if they're not also protesting against the women who are doing it themselves. Next two questions from Wither125, and I already answered part of the first one in a prior question, in that we don't know what the future technology is going to hold a few years down the road. But as for your second question, what do I think of PC players? And no, I can't say they're all hackers. Well, guess what? PC players are all hackers. No, for the most part, PC players are a different breed than console players. They play with a mouse and a keyboard, although they will say they can play with a controller and shit like that. They play with much more powerful equipment, yet they have the lowest sales figures of all the big name games. Call of Duty, Battlefield, Assassin's Creed, to name a few. Part of that has to do with pirating. Part of that has to do with the fact that console versions of the games are dumbed down towards the PC genre. So in general, PC gamers are a category of their own, evidenced by the number of PC-only MMO or Battle Arena type games that really wouldn't fly on a console, yet are absolutely popular on PC. Sure, you may like the same games a console player does, but as much as PlayStation 4, Nintendo, and Xbox have their differences, they have more in common with each other than they actually do with PC. Next question from Megamaster 592. Were you ever bullied as a kid or teen? And if you were a teen in this modern age, how would you deal with people around since this generation is screwed up? You know, it's funny because what's considered bullying now, back then was just considered normal. By today's pussified standards, yes, I would have been classified as bullied. But again, times were different than the shit that kids go through today. My version of bullying was just considered two kids didn't like each other or jealousy. You know, when I was younger, I was the best athlete in almost all sports. Didn't matter what it was or what age group I was playing with. People wanted me on their teams. Well, the top athlete in the grade 1 year ahead of me didn't like that I was more athletic than him. He thought he was king shit in his class, but anytime the grades were mixed for sports and we played organized sports, I was the superior athlete to him. So him and his two friends, all a year older than me, would gang up and pick fights with me. They didn't pick fights with me individually. No. They were too chicken shit for that. They had to do it in groups because they were fucking cowards. I got into a number of fist fights with them, unfair fights, because of jealousy. It had nothing to do with social status or who was part of the in crowd or who was different and could be picked on. It was seen as two better athletes fighting to be the alpha male athlete. So it really wasn't considered bullying back in those days. You know, bullying implies a certain level of someone not fighting back. Fuck that. I fought back all the time. Matter of fact, when those three idiots weren't all in a group, I would pick my fights. I would jump them and beat the fuck out of them individually, knowing full well I was going to have to deal with the group later when they retaliated. I wasn't scared of them. I wasn't intimidated by them, which is usually what bullying entails, but the fact is, I was always fighting them 3-on-1, and that's what will be considered bullying by today's standards. But individually, when it was 1-on-1, oh yeah, I'd kick the living shit out of those motherfuckers, man. As for bullying today, the one thing all bullies have in common is insecurity. They're insecure, weak-minded fucks, and the only reason they bully is because they have an inferiority complex. The best way to stop bullying is to stand up to your bullies, even if it means beating the living shit out of them. You know, when you show you have no fear and no emotional insecurity, there is a good chance the bullies will show their insecurity just by you challenging them. So for anyone out there who gets bullied, stand up for yourself, fight for yourself, and you'll see how quickly bullies back down when they realize you're no longer insecure. Next question from ThePureJewa. Do you think weed should be legalized, and what is your opinion on the usage of weed? Now, I've talked about this topic in a prior question and answer session, so I'm going to keep this brief. As of right now, there is no scientific evidence that shows its medicinal purposes or long-term harm. There are suggestive studies that could help or harm people, but there's nothing conclusive right now. As a medicine, it's yet to show that it can cure anything. All it does is mask the symptoms of a particular illness or reduce pain, and there are plenty of other forms of medication that already accomplish that. It also shows a very high potential for addiction, just like any other painkiller would, but again, no conclusive proof has come out on that yet. Well, other than NFL players pissing away their careers just to get high. My issue with medicinal weed is that people want to smoke it. And they say by smoking it, that actually increases the medicinal properties, and that is the biggest crock of shit you can ever imagine. Anatomy 101 tells you your digestive system is the quickest way to administer medicine. Think about this for a second. Other than an asthma inhaler, how often is our respiratory system used to administer medicine? Very rarely. Reason being, our digestive system is better for that. The only medicinal marijuana that I would agree with is edible marijuana. That's it. As for recreational weed, I'm still in shock 2 states legalized this shit. You know, unlike alcohol, there's no measure for how high you are. With drinking, you can see how legally drunk someone is through a blood alcohol test. With weed, there is no unit of measure. So how would you punish or reprimand someone who uses it and then wants to operate vehicles, operate machinery, or uses it at places of business you're responsible for the safety of others? The legalization of recreational marijuana is leading to a gray area that is just asking for trouble. Personally, I would have never legalized recreational marijuana, mainly because you can't measure how high people are. There's no penalty for somebody who goes past the point of being coherent or having all their motor functions. I just see the legalization of it causing more problems than actually solving problems. Next question from Tylericous, and he has to give a little bit of background on this motherfucker. When Grand Theft Auto came out, GameSpot gave it a 9, and the criticism was that it represented women unfairly and had some minor flaws. Then all of a sudden there was flack from the general public saying that this game should be a 10, blah, 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 blah. So he goes into 2 questions. When a reviewer reviews a game, do they deserve flack if it isn't exactly what the general public thinks or wants of the game? And second, do you think a reviewer's gender or sexuality matters when reviewing a game? Now, I like this question. I know the review that you're talking about, and I remember the flack over that one, but I'll start by saying this. I have wanted to do a video on how bad video game reviews are these days and how they should be doing their reviews. I wanted to do a video on how I would do reviews, but I haven't had the time to put that video together yet, so chances are I'm never going to do that, motherfucker. But essentially, reviews are opinions. End of story. End of discussion. When you read or listen to a review, it is only an opinion. When I bitch about games, it's my opinion. Even if people like the game, like fucking Skyrim Job or Crap Ops or Techno Kitty. Oh, fuck those games, man. But when someone reviews a game, it's based on the opinion, and there is likely to be dissenting views or thoughts on the motherfucker. The difference, though, is when your review is a representation of a company as opposed to an individual review. You know, if you're a blogger and you want to offer up your own review on your own website, sure, by all means. You're a YouTube channel that does reviews and answers to nobody but yourself, sure, praise or rip a game all you want. But when a company hires you to do a review and your job is to be a representative of a company, your opinion needs to be tempered. You are no longer doing just a personal review. You're no longer only representing your personal feelings. You have a responsibility to stick with facts and judge a game based on its merits and be a representative of all opinions on the game. Thus, when websites and magazines and news publications offer up reviews, opinions should not be the only factor of a game. Facts of the game should be the main focus. Does the story make sense? Do the mechanics work? Are there technical issues with the game? Does it feel rushed or completed? Is the frame rate steady? Does it have a resolution drop at any point? A review is subjective, and all of these items are up for debate, especially when it comes to graphics and mechanics of the motherfucker, but it's certainly more objective than just an opinion on whether you like or dislike a game or whether or not you find a game fun. Oh, when people say I had fun on this game and they rate it high, that drives me fucking absurd. But in any event, when the reviewer brought in her feelings about the treatment of women, that went into personal thoughts. That went beyond the scope of representing a company. Her company isn't in a position to take a stand for women's rights. So why is that being made part of her review? Why is her personal fixation being placed in a video game assessment that others will look in determining whether or not they're going to purchase it? That's why these websites have commentaries where authors and writers can put together a piece on their own opinions on a video games and what they do to need to improve that. That's where you detail your issues of the treatment with women. Create a commentary article. Write a full piece on your personal crusade. Who gives a shit? But don't do that in a review in which your company is now the representative of. I don't have an issue with someone scoring a game high or low. I really don't give a shit. I can disagree with their assessment, but if they can provide a legitimate reason for their score, sure. If they can substantiate their subjective review, fine. Not a problem with that. Giving the game a 9 wasn't the problem. The problem was equating that score to a personal affront to her. The funny thing is, what she said in her review was spot on, though, in how Grand Theft Auto portrays women. It does treat women like prostitutes and strippers and morons for most of the time, but at the same time, it treats almost all black people like criminals. Did she make a stand for the treatment of minorities? No, she didn't. Did she say that hipsters and white people were portrayed as bungling idiots and stereotyped in every possible way, like video game junkies, white guys trying to act black, or abusive cops? No, she didn't. She focused on a small part of the game that openly insults everyone. Grand Theft Auto has never been politically correct, and it looks to offend everyone equally because the game is a satire of stereotypes society has created. So of course, this game is going to mistreat women because that's the point. Of course it's going to stereotype black people because that's the point. Essentially, she's knocking a game for arguing her same point for her, only in a different way. If the reviewer were a blogger and wrote that review on her blog, this wouldn't have been an issue. She's entitled to her opinion 100%. She would be entitled towards her opinion showing how misogynistic Grand Theft Auto can be, but at the same time, she's a hypocrite for not pointing out the other elements of the game that would offend other people. But she did a review on this as an employee of a company, and she represented the company's review with her personal offense. The score was irrelevant. The problem is why the game got that score in the first place. I agree with what she said about women because that part is true. However, it's part of the satire of the Grand Theft Auto series. The problem is that her stance had no business being in her video game review. Anyways, 3 videos down, 2 more to go. The final 2 videos have the longest answers to your questions. People decided to go the controversial route, so game marriage, politics, guns, and religion are coming. I mean, shit, if you couldn't pick any of the most polarizing questions possible, y'all thought of it. But anyway, I'm gonna just jump right into the motherfuckers and piss off as many people as I possibly can this time. No holding back. No sugarcoating shit. I'm gonna logically dick slap a number of people that need to hear what I have to say on these topics, so y'all gonna enjoy that. So as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video.